Okay, well, we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, well, hello everyone. We're delighted to have all of you with us, and I want to wish you a very warm welcome to an inside look at Tuolumne River Trust, past, present, and future. I'm John Nimmons, chair of the Tuolumne River Trust Board, and this is a special Zoom event that we wanted to offer to our most committed and generous supporters, including all of you. We know that our contacts with our supporters are often to ask for financial help. This event isn't about that. This event is about thanking you for everything you do for the Trust and giving you some insights into the Trust's amazing history and some of the truly impressive things that our staff are doing now thanks to your support. I think this is probably unnecessary, but if any of you don't already know Patrick, our executive director, I first want to bring him in to say hello, and Patrick will be hosting the second part of this event. Patrick?
Yeah, just a big welcome. It's really great to see so many of you. Wish we were doing this in person, but I really appreciate everybody taking some time here. I'm thrilled to spend a little bit of time with you and just talking about some of the stuff we're working on. So look forward to the discussion, and welcome.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So the way we're going to do this today is to start with two of the Trust's longtime luminaries, Joe Daly and John Amodio, whom many of you who've been around the Trust for a long time certainly know well. Joe and John are first going to take us for a little stroll down memory lane, recounting some of the Trust's formative years and showing you some historic video that many of us probably haven't seen before. I should say some of the video is over 35 years old now, and it's not quite theater quality, but it's really the content that we thought would be interesting for folks. So then Joe and John will turn the program over to Patrick, who will skip ahead to today to offer you an insider's view on another short video showing the breadth and depth of everything that the Trust is doing now. Following that, we'd love to hear your comments and questions and engage you in any way that you'd like to participate. So there'll be a Q&A following Patrick's presentation, and he'll explain the mechanics of that and how you can join the conversation when the time comes. But first, let me briefly introduce our luminaries, Joe Daly and John Amodio. Joe was a founding member of the Tuolumne River Trust and served as board chair for 12 years, from 1985 to 1997. In 1981, Joe joined forces with a diverse bipartisan team of river preservation pioneers who immediately focused their energy on having the Tuolumne designated as a federal wild and scenic river, which means that the river will be preserved in a free-flowing condition for the enjoyment of present and future generations. 3 years later, on September 13th, 1984, Congress rewarded their fervor, granting wild and scenic status to the Tuolumne. And then Joe didn't stop there. As board chair until 1997, he led a successful campaign to persuade the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to reject 5 dams on the Koepele, which is the Tuolumne's largest tributary. While he was doing that, Joe also had a 43-year career as co-founder and co-owner of Echo River Trips, outfitting rafting trips in California, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska. Echo Trips brought folks to the Tuolumne for 34 years to experience whitewater rafting. In 2010, Joe joined the Trust Board of Advisors, and he remains an active and valued member. Joe's retired now, happily living in Berkeley with his wife, Sue, of 48 years, and continuing his many contributions to the Trust. So that brings us to John Amodio. John has worked in the field of environmental protection for over 40 years. 22 years for the state of California, both as a gubernatorial appointee and then as an environmental program manager in civil service, and 23 years working in leadership positions for nonprofit, environmental organizations. His 22 years in state service included time as deputy director of the governor's office of planning and research and assistant resources secretary. In his 23 years of in the nonprofit realm, Joe has specialized in startup organizations, building broad-based constituencies and managing land and river preservation campaigns. He's played leadership roles, first in the 1970s, expanding Redwood National Park. As a campaign organizer and lobbyist in Washington, he was recognized by Congressman Phil Burton, the author of the Redwood National Park expansion, as the citizen activist most responsible for its success. And in 1990, he led the congressional creation of the 300,000 acre Smith River National Recreation Area. So you notice I skipped over the 80s. What was John doing in the 80s and what is he doing now? During the 80s, John was executive director of the Tuolumne River Trust, and together with Joe and others, spearheaded the successful effort to have 83 miles of the river declared wild and scenic. John currently serves as the forest health consultant for the trust, and he's been our lead on Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions, a broad collaboration of organizations focused on restoring hundreds of thousands of acres of forest that were burned by the 2013 Rim Fire. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe and John, and they'll either introduce you or reintroduce you to some of the Trust's most hallowed history. Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, John. I'd like to talk about the rich heritage of the Tuolumne River Trust. In 1890, Yosemite National Park was created, and it is no accident that the headwaters of the Tuolumne were included inside those boundaries. When you stand in the high country in Tuolumne Meadows, I think any of us feels we're a step closer to heaven in being there. Yet there has also been controversy. The Tuolumne River has long been sought after by distant municipalities and nearby irrigation districts. And after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the city of San Francisco pushed very hard to get water development rights in Hetch Hetchy Valley. Enter conservationist John Muir. And he said, "Dam Hetch Hetchy, as well dam for water tanks, the people's cathedrals and churches, for no holier temple has ever been consecrated by the heart of man." The first national grassroots conservation battle was over whether or not to put a dam inside a national park. San Francisco argued it needed a reliable water system after the earthquake. John Muir and the Sierra Club fought valiantly to save Hetch Hetchy, but ultimately they lost the fight when Congress passed the Raker Act of 1913, allowing O'Shaughnessy Dam to be built. Almost 70 years later, another Tuolumne River controversy took place. This time, San Francisco teamed up with Modesto and Turlock irrigation districts to build the Clavey-Ward Ferry project on the last wild section of the river in the Sierra foothills. Fortunately, in 1979, the U.S. Forest Service determined this section of the river was suitable for wild and scenic river status, but the ultimate decision rested with the U.S. Congress. The Forest Service recommendation to Congress granted the river a 3-year protection period, but that was going to end in late 1982. The dam builders wanted to kill the recommendation and start their own study process with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, an agency that had not turned down a dam project in 50 years. The congressional battle was about to begin. Enter John Amodio and the Tuolumne River Trust. But before I pass the baton to John, we should give recognition to Bob Hackamack for his decades-long work to protect the Tuolumne. Bob has been our Rock of Gibraltar. John.
Thanks, Joe, and wonderful to be with everyone. The campaign was dynamic and complex, akin to three-dimensional chess. In 3 years, an unlikely cast of characters achieved what American Rivers described as, quote, the greatest victory in the history of the wild and scenic system, and one of the greatest conservation achievements of the century, end quote. For those of us who were there, though, perhaps even more gratifying were the 2 ecstatic dance parties at the Sonora Fairgrounds, Fort Mason, in San Francisco. But at our startup in mid-1981, conventional political wisdom was that we had a mission impossible for several reasons. Despite a passionate grassroots campaign, Congress had recently allowed the Stanislaus River to be buried under a reservoir. The dam builders can now use their same winning strategy of their big money funding the big lie that the choice was between a small group of elitist rafters versus farmers feeding the nation. Remember, the dam proponents were the politically powerful city of San Francisco and 2 equally powerful agricultural districts. Then in 1982, Republican Pete Wilson narrowly beat Jerry Brown for the U.S. Senate. With Republicans controlling the Senate, Wilson's support would be essential, but considered highly unlikely as its margin of victory came from the agricultural Central Valley. Our own champion, Representative Phil Burton, who had committed that he would, quote, take care of the House if he get Pete Wilson's support, suddenly died. This made the most powerful California member of Congress, Tony Koepele, who represented and supported the irrigation districts. Well, hopeless as many thought our projects, we had no choice but do our best. We developed 2 fundamental strategies. First, we reframed the issue. We chose one of basic fairness. We recast the dam proponents as the extremists who were seeking to claim all the benefits of the public river at the expense of everyone else. We reduced the issue to a simple, stark choice between leaving the river in its current balanced state through wild and scenic protection or sacrificing its remaining extraordinary natural and recreational values for the exclusive benefit of 3 entities, who frankly had already harnessed 90% of the river's development potential. Their new dams would substantially damage or destroy 4 beloved family and children's camps, the finest wild trout river in the Sierra, and an incomparable whitewater experience. Second, we built upon the existing committed Sierra Club, FOR, and boating community by creating a much broader umbrella association of the diverse lovers and beneficiaries of the river. Key players included the cities of Berkeley and San Jose family and San Francisco family camps, and Camp Tawonga, the Bay Area's Jewish community's children's camp. We also flipped California Trout, which had supported the dam on the stand, to now supporting wild and scenic on the tee. Many stories can be told, and some of you tonight could tell some stories I probably have not heard about how each of these entities proved invaluable in adding to our credibility with the media and elected officials. Our appeal to fairness resonated with the media and public. Our political strategy for elected officials emphasized that objectively, the broad public interest was best served through wild and scenic. And we proved that the public overwhelmingly supported our position through a vigorous grassroots campaign. One commenter aptly described it, it took 1,000 heroes, such as the owner of Corn Nuts, who put our cause on 20 million packets, to the father of today's governor, Judge Bill Newsom, who played a key role in turning San Francisco from a dam proponent to a wild and scenic supporter. And there are many, many more little-known stories. Allow me to close the glorious beginnings of the Tuolumne River Preservation Trust with some vintage, less than high definition video from 1984, in which Richard Chamberlain, the hottest actor of the day and whom we dubbed as the poet of the river, eloquently, better than I, describes the drama of the Tuolumne, followed by a brief clip of Caltrout's Central Valley representative Don Moyer, who humorously debunks the ludicrous claim that they could divert 90% of the river's flow and magically improve the fishery.
Don did a great job of disarming the panel. It was wonderful to see. Humor can go a long way. After we had the September 1984 victory, we thought we were ready to fold up our tent and go home. But we learned that every wild and scenic river needs a management plan. I had no idea what a management plan was, but it took us 2 years of negotiating to work out the details for that. Soon after that, the battle to save the Clevy was fought in the 1990s. Once these political fights ended, the scope of the Tuolumne Trust expanded into a watershed perspective, ranging from the headwaters to the Central Valley to the San Francisco Bay Area. And at this point, Patrick, you're on.
Great, thanks, Joe. what I want to do is give an update on our recent work as well as a look at what's coming up for us. First, I'll talk about our advocacy work to get more water flowing down the river, which we primarily focus this on advocacy in San Francisco. Then I'll talk about our headwater forest restoration work. Third, I'll provide a brief update on our youth restoration, our youth programs, and community organizing in Modesto. And finally, I'll give you a sneak peek at 2 new restoration projects that we are kicking off along the lower Tuolumne River. I've worked for TRT for 20 years, and it's amazing to me how deep the roots of much of this work runs and how far back many of the projects go. Joe and John gave a great story about the Wild and Scenic campaign, and we briefly heard about the Koepele campaign to prevent that beautiful river from being dammed. All of that was before my time. When I came onto this team, we went from a period in TRT's existence where we focused on preservation to what we primarily work on now, which is dominantly restoration. So rather than stopping bad things from happening, which we still keep as a strategy, we more predominantly focus on restoration, fixing so many of the bad things that have already happened. And this work takes a long time. As a parent, I liken it to raising kids and reflecting on how my own kids can trash the house in, not in seemingly minutes, and then it takes many hours for us to put it back together. So when you realize that the river has been impacted and degraded by human activity for about 170 years, it gives you an idea of how long it is going to take to restore the health of the river. So let me start with San Francisco. As you know, we believe restoring the health of the Tuolumne River and its salmon and steelhead fishery will require a 2-pronged strategy. Restoring physical habitat on the one hand, such as floodplain, spawning beds, channel complexity for migrating salmon, and then on the other hand, restoring flows. Only 20% of the Tuolumne's natural flow is dedicated to the environment. The rest is diverted. The physical habitat doesn't function properly without enough water. In late 2018, the State Water Board approved a higher flow requirement of 40% unimpaired flow. But to actually get that additional flow in the river takes another separate decision by the State Water Board. And that second decision has been slowed down by the prospect of negotiated agreements, widely known as voluntary agreements, which have reportedly fallen apart. But while that process is playing out, we've been focusing our efforts on the SFPUC Commission with help from the San Francisco Mayor's Office. We believe that San Francisco has more than enough supply guarantees for the very, very extreme drought that they base their plan on. In fact, we think the drought they use to plan is truly unrealistic. It is the kind of drought we haven't seen since lions roamed Europe. It is a drought we haven't experienced in over 1,000 years. Our policy director, Peter Dreckmeyer, spent a lot of time educating the SFPUC commissioners about this, and they're understanding more and more that the models that commission staff used have some overly conservative assumptions built into them. The hopeful sign is that we are gaining traction amongst the commissioners for the SFPUC to voluntarily contribute the SFPUC share of the state's 40% unimpaired flow target with appropriate protections built in. Peter has very clearly outlined how water can be used more carefully and sideboards that will allow the SFPUC to relax its water releases during a drought sequence. So stay tuned for information on this. Peter has many ways that you all can help by providing supporting comments at SFPUC Commission meetings and other meetings like that. Moving up to the Sierra Nevada, we've seen significant progress on ecological restoration. Our forested headwaters region is so important for providing abundant clean water, sequestering carbon, and providing habitat for so many unique fish and wildlife species. But let's be honest, the forests have been subjected to years of poor management practices, including excessive logging and fire exclusion. Today's forests, even those that haven't burned, are not healthy even if they appear healthy. There are overgrown thickets of trees, and I'm gonna share my screen to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. Give me just a minute. So can everybody see that? Nod yes? Okay, great. So these are overgrown thickets of trees like this stand here. Maybe these appear healthy, you know, there's lots of trees in that picture, but really looking at them, a lot of them are skinny little small trees. And even protected animals like California spotted owls continue to decline, in part because extreme wildfires continue to burn up their habitat. We've been making fantastic progress towards restoring the health of the forested areas by working in a collaborative group called the Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions Forest Collaborative, which I'm now chairing. YSS, as we call it, includes other conservation groups, recreational users, and the timber industry. We've successfully leveraged donor dollars to raise over 18 million in funding that will restore nearly 14,000 acres of forests, meadows, streams, and wildlife habitat. Just as exciting, we're laying the groundwork to test some new collaborative approaches to planning projects. We're working through a very strong collaborative process where the Forest Service is really letting our collaborative YSS group drive the ship, or at least navigate to the destination. We're bringing the latest science to this effort that underpins new ways of managing our forests, and specifically new ways of managing habitat. As an example, I mentioned spotted owls, which have been the focal species that has dictated how much of the forest has been managed for the past several decades. The guiding philosophy has been that spotted owls require a closed canopy, which means that the branches of adjacent trees are interlocking. The latest science has shown that canopy isn't the only consideration and may not be the most important. Instead, recent studies suggest the presence of very large, tall trees are really important. And these are the very trees that are in shortage due to past logging and other practices, as in this photo. So we're bringing science like this to restore a forest that more closely resembles the past forest conditions like John Muir would have seen, and like what is seen in this historic photo here. More open and importantly, very heterogeneous forests with individuals, trees, clumps, and openings, and a higher percentage of big, tall trees. The outcomes we hope for is a process for conducting planning on a large scale of hundreds of thousands of acres so that we may meet the restoration needs of this vast and iconic landscape in a climate that is changing more rapidly in a population whose size needs are diverse. Moving downstream to the Central Valley, in Modesto, the Tuolumne River flows through several economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, and the river's health is truly linked to neighborhood health. The health of the river depends on the health of neighborhoods and vice versa. And most of these neighborhoods are underparked, meaning they have fewer parks per residence than most places in the state. And so residents in these neighborhoods have the most to gain from a cleaner river and improved parks. To build a constituency, we have a multi-pronged strategy of education, organizing, and leadership development. We've worked with literally thousands of students through our Trekking the Tuolumne program. And here's a photo of some kids enjoying a summer camp that we've sponsored in the past. We teach school kids about the river, where their water comes from, and how they can help keep it healthy. Another program we have is the TRAC, Tuolumne River Adventure Club, which teaches high school students about outdoor recreation along the river and leadership training. Here's a photo of kids canoeing in the TRAC program. We do many other programs teaching kids and families about recreating outside. We take them fishing, take them hiking, all kinds of activities like that. As one participant, Daly, recently stated, I felt that becoming involved with TRT would allow me to create change in my community and become more educated about the environment. Daly represents the future of river and environmental stewardship, and we're so gratified to help her on her journey. But this effort isn't limited to youth education. We're also working with adult community members to teach them about the river and help them learn what opportunities it presents for their families. We provided training and helped hundreds of residents get involved in decision-making that affects their lives, including park development and improvement. It is this grassroots support that will create the pressure we need to ensure parks and the river are taken care of and accessible to all. And so speaking of parks, now I'd like to shift to two exciting new projects upon which we are embarking. I call them new, but the concepts for these projects have been around for almost 2 decades. There are 2 documents that have guided much of our restoration work along the lower river. The Habitat Restoration Plan, which is focused on habitat, and a framework for the future for the Tuolumne River Parkway, which is focused on parks. These 2 projects are the last 2 large projects identified in the framework for the future and they are priority projects identified in the Habitat Restoration Plan. So let me dive into these a little bit here. Sorry. First here to orient you is a map. Here's Modesto, and downstream is the Dos Rios Ranch, a project that we spearheaded the acquisition. The first project that I want to talk about is up here at LaGrange. It's a 240-acre floodplain restoration project. Floodplain habitat is a key habitat type for young salmon, and the Tuolumne lacks quality floodplain habitat. Here's what the site looks like now. You can see it's kind of a barren area, not a lot of trees or vegetation. And you can't quite tell from this photo, but the floodplains themselves are pretty elevated, high above the river channel. At the LaGrange project site, we'll excavate low floodplain terraces that inundate more frequently. We'll place gravel in the river to improve spawning habitat. We'll plant native riparian forests to improve the productivity of the site. And keeping in mind that this is parkland, even though there's no actual park facilities there, we're going to build recreational amenities such as trails, boat launches, and restrooms, so that instead of basically a vacant lot, the community will have a park. The second project is in the West Modesto neighborhood, which is circled here in red. It's a 70-acre parcel that is part of the Tuolumne River Regional Park, but like the LaGrange project, is actually a vacant lot that has been awaiting development for about 18 years. Here's what it looks like right now. Doesn't look very promising, does it? But I assure you it holds a lot of promise. The project includes floodplain creation and improvement, wetlands that will capture stormwater and clean it, a flood management component to reduce flooding to the adjacent neighborhood, and of course, development of the site as a park. We expect that this will be one of those rare projects that provides a wide range of benefits: environmental restoration, flood management, and water quality benefits. And Modesto will end up with a beautiful river park at the end with places that look like this, and this, and this. It's like motherhood at apple pie, and is really exciting to think about for the future of the river and the future of Modesto. And today I'm excited to announce that we just received words that these two projects will receive a big chunk of necessary funding to develop them. The funding isn't going to get us all the way there, but it's a huge start with a recommendation from the Department of Water Resources to fund these two projects. We expect the recommendations to be approved by the director of DWR in the next few weeks. So now we've got a short video, and then we have time for questions afterwards. While the video is playing, please feel free to enter any questions you may have into the chat feature on Zoom. And Shanley is going to take it with this short video now.
Since our founding in 1981, the Tuolumne River Trust has been the voice for the river. We seek a healthy and vibrant river that is teeming with fish and wildlife, safe for drinking, fishing, and swimming, and held in a trust as a refuge for our children and grandchildren. We build support for stewardship of the river through watershed-wide education programs, on-the-ground habitat restoration projects, and by promoting policies to protect and restore the Tuolumne. With 9 staff in our offices in Sonora, Modesto, and San Francisco, we are the only organization working throughout the watershed. In the Sierra Nevada, the 2013 Rim Fire burned over 250,000 acres of Sierra Nevada forest, the largest in history. Since March of 2015, you've helped us restore over 1,000 acres of forest and 24 meadows. We've planted over 100,000 trees and rehabilitated 65 miles of trails. In this process, we've engaged over 3,000 volunteers. In 2017, we signed an agreement with the Stanislaus National Forest to restore the health of the forested watershed. We plan to replant thousands of acres of forest that burned at high severity, restore the remaining unburned forest, and reintroduce healthy fire. This will create a more resilient forest landscape that continues to provide clean water, better sequester carbon, and improve wildlife habitat. As we move down the watershed, we reach the Central Valley, where after nearly 10 years of work, we were able to remove the broken and dangerous Dinant Dam from the lower river, restoring the Tuolamee's flows in that region. Last year, your support engaged over 2,000 volunteers in habitat restoration and river cleanups, removing 50 tons of garbage from the river and surrounding communities. You helped us offer 55 recreation opportunities to youth and their families, educate over 1,000 students in the classroom through hands-on field trips, and engage hundreds of young people from the Central Valley community in river outings and activities. In the Bay Area, we advocate for a healthier river that supports all life. In 2008, we convinced the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission to drop plans to divert an additional 25 million gallons of water per day from the river. Last year, you enabled us to submit 130 pages of science-based comments to public agencies and testify at 27 meetings, as well as give over 40 community presentations that educate the public about current water policy issues. This is just a glimpse at all of the work we do along the watershed, and none of it would be possible without you. So from all of us here at the Tuolumne River Trust, thank you so much for your support as we continue to protect and restore the beautiful Tuolumne watershed.
Just really want to echo that sentiment. You all are people that really make this work possible. You make it happen, and a huge thank you to y'all. We really couldn't do it without you. We do have a chance to do some Q&A here. You can raise your hand if you have a question, click on the participants, and then after that you click on the raise hand button that'll appear on the right side, or you can enter your question in the chat feature. We're happy to take them either way. So let's turn to that now. Any questions or comments? Or maybe everybody's sleeping now. I don't know.
Since everybody, I think, brought their own beverage, let's go ahead and take a group photo of everybody cheersing for the tea. So if you could hold up your glass. Let me go ahead and let's see. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Great.
All right.
Thanks.
Great. So let's see, I'm just scrolling through to see if any raised hands are out there. There's one from Kevin Rice. Kevin, go ahead. I'm trying to unmute you.
Right. So I was just wondering if you guys have had any contact with Bryn Kennedy at all in terms of just giving her information about the work of TRT.
You know, that's a good question. We haven't done that yet.
And I don't know if you're allowed to do that.
Well, we certainly can endorse any candidates.
Right, got that.
We can provide information though, and we haven't done that yet.
Okay.
About a candidate running for Congress up in the foothills region. Good question. Let's see, there's some others.
Yeah, it looks like we have a few. If you can see them there, can go ahead. Let's see. Oh, with Felicia Marcus gone as chair of the SWRCB, should we be more concerned? Is Governor Newsom a friend of the Tuolumne?
Really good question there. And, you know, Peter Dreckmeyer is, or maybe he was on the call. He can also weigh in on this. But, you know, I think Governor Newsom came into office full of optimism and thinking that he may be able to help broker a deal. But he's run up against the hard realities of California water politics, and frankly, the Trump administration hasn't helped the situation at all. He's backed off, from what I can tell, some of the urgent desire to reach an agreement, and I think the Newsom administration is in the midst of figuring out its next move. It's sued the Trump administration, and that's really kind of put cold water on some of the hopes for the voluntary agreements. So, you know, we're hopeful that they'll take a new direction.
And then one more question from Scott. Oh, we have more questions coming in. Thanks, everyone. Scott asked, how does the Modesto city politicians react to your efforts?
Yeah, that's another good question. In Modesto, you know, I think we get kind of mixed responses. People really love our work in the neighborhoods and the park effort that we focus on, but they aren't happy about our support and advocacy for more flow. And that's okay. You don't have to agree on everything, but the good news is that they do support us and work with us to build parks, and you know, we're helping to connect neighborhood residents to city leaders, and they come to those meetings, and so we've had really good responses on that front. Haven't been as successful on the flow issue though, admittedly.
Yeah, and so that's a good segue into Linda's question. She says, I'm concerned that we're losing the propaganda war concerning river flows. When I go to the movies in Modesto, the MID and TID run ads stressing the voluntary science-based agreements that will preserve jobs. Any thoughts about how we can counter this? As it is, there's little support in Stanislaus County for increased river flows.
Yeah, completely agree. This is one of the places where we're sort of outnumbered with dollars, the dollars of MID and TID and what they can throw at their marketing campaigns. You know, I know they run ads basically on Capitol Public Radio up in Sacramento, and it's tough to hear that. Countering it, we work hard behind the scenes is basically how we counter it. We do work really hard with our other river partners out there to meet with individual legislators, and importantly right now with the State Water Resources Control Board members, and keep them educated. Peter's been doing a fantastic job working with the SFPUC Commission and San Francisco Mayor's Office. Hopefully I think we're making some headway there. So our approach has been really to work collaboratively with other groups that are working on these same issues, and a lot of that happens behind the scenes. But you know, we haven't had the dollars to put out these big public ad campaigns. So that is a problem, you know, it's a struggle.
All right, I'm looking through. It doesn't look like we have any hands. Oh, we have a question that just came in from Cedric. Yes, are efforts to restore after the rim fire able to keep progressing despite the COVID lockdown?
Yeah, actually they are. So a lot of the work we do helps mitigate the potential for wildfires. And so that work is one of these essential functions that continues on. And so our folks are out there in the field. We're still doing that field work. We have contractors that'll be out doing work with, of course, appropriate COVID protection measures in place. But fortunately, that work is important, and it keeps continuing forward.
And then I see that Patricia has her hand raised. So we'll go to you, Patricia.
Just kind of a question of curiosity. I know there's these big stimulus bills, and I wasn't sure if nonprofits like you are eligible or getting any of the money the government's providing at the federal level.
Yeah, good question. And fortunately, nonprofits are eligible, and we have been able to tap into some of that. So we're grateful for that, and we intend to put it to good use to keep things running here, basically.
No, that's great. I just wasn't sure how that was working. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Good seeing you, Tricia.
Good to see you.
And Robert asks, what is the judgment of staff about the progress in getting the SFPUC to abandon their extreme projections?
This might be a good one to, hey Robert, good to see you. This might be a good one to turn over to Peter. if you are still on. I think I saw you just a minute ago.
Yeah, here he is. Hey, Peter.
I guess I need to mirror my screen. Cheers, everybody, and thank you so much for your support. We are making some progress. SFPUC staff is pretty entrenched, and that's been disappointing. But last year, we were focusing on a lot of water supply assessments that are required for large development projects. And there were a lot of discrepancies between SFPUC documents and planning department documents. So we were prepared to actually appeal some of these projects. And the mayor's office approached us and said, hey, you know, these are really important to the mayor. What could we do to keep you from appealing and possibly stopping these projects? And so we got some commitments from them. The most important one was to create a mayor's office water supply stakeholder group. And our goal was to get all the interested parties, whether it was business or the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, the NGOs, together to have conversations so that we weren't stuck in this place where it was a he said, she said. We'd meet with elected officials, they'd nod, they'd thank us for the information. They'd meet with the SFPUC, they'd hear something different, and they'd throw up their hands and say, gosh, you know, I don't know what to do, and they'd be neutralized. And so through the stakeholder group, I think we've convinced the mayor's office that we're pretty reasonable. And her senior environmental advisor once told me, hey, I see what you mean, because he sat in on a small meeting and he saw how uncooperative SFPUC staff was. And more recently, two of the commissioners, Francesca Vitor and Sophie Maxwell, have really been standing up and questioning staff and pushing back. They requested a small meeting that took place a couple of weeks ago with a couple of us from the environmental community themselves and SFPUC staff and someone from the Bay Area Council, which represents business, and from BOSCA. And we went through a resolution that Commissioner Vitor championed last year, and to talk about what progress was being made on those items. And there's been very little progress. And one of her items, which was that the voluntary agreement should include biological goals so that we could measure our success, isn't in the voluntary agreements, and the SFPUC conveniently left that out of the conversation. But we also, she had asked for a resolution in support of the state's lawsuit over the federal biological opinion for the Delta. And staff hadn't done anything on that for 2.5 months, so we discussed that. And out of this meeting, Sophie Maxwell, the other commissioner who was on, she said, you know, you keep telling us what we can't do. We want to know what we can do right now. We want to see some relief for the fish and recreation and other things. And staff really didn't have much of a response. Basically, they say, you know, we're just kind of waiting and hoping the voluntary agreement will get back on track and move through. And a really interesting thing happened at the last meeting. Another water supply assessment came up, and Commissioner Vitor said, you know, I'm not comfortable just approving all of this development when we're not making any water available to the fish. And she and Commissioner Maxwell voted no on the water supply assessment. So it passed on a 3-2 vote, but it sent a real signal that there are at least 2 commissioners who are questioning things and want to see some action. And I've been working for the trust for 12 years now, going on 13. And that was only the second time I saw dissent from the commission. The other time was on an energy issue. So I think we're getting some traction both in the mayor's office and with at least 2 of the commissioners. And the mayor's office is really important because the SFPUC commission, they're not elected. They're appointed by the mayor. So they're not very responsive to the public. If they were out trying to get the Sierra Club endorsement, League of Conservation Voters endorsement, they would have to prove that they were environmentalists, because that matters a lot to the people of San Francisco. Our survey a couple of years ago showed that. So it's been a long process, hard to say where it's going to go, but I do feel like we're making some progress, and that feels really good.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we have more questions that came in. Jim Green asks, What is the time frame for the 2 new projects and what are the costs?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jim. Time frame, it'll probably be about 2 years for the planning, design, permitting work. We have to do CEQA analysis. That's the California Environmental Quality Act. It's a law that we have to, get through all that work. So it takes time, and then, hopefully begin implementing those projects in about year 3 or so. Costs, total costs for the LaGrange project. Well, we'll be refining these, the cost estimating through the design work, but probably, planning and design, the whole thing soup to nuts, maybe 5 million. The park project in Modesto, again, we'll be refining that soup to nuts, maybe $3.5–4 million to do those.
And then we have a question from Scott. He asks, is the Tuolumne watershed better or worse today than what was expected after the rim fire?
Well, it's a difficult one to answer. I'm sure others on this might have some opinions about it. But, a lot of the watershed now is doesn't have forest on it anymore. So in that sense, it's not great. On the other hand, it's regrowing, and there are new trees that are in the ground, and there are seedlings that have been sprouting and growing, and so it's on a good trajectory. And the unburned areas, we have those in our sites to improve the health of those. Those certainly need some work as well. So yes, it's kind of a mixed bag. We don't have that severe erosion that we were seeing right after the fire, when there was no vegetation holding things in place, and creeks and the river itself were just chocolate brown. So that's good news. Things have kind of stabilized.
And if I might add in, Patrick.
Yes, please, John.
The silver lining of the rim fire was that it was such a horrific event, beyond any scale people had witnessed in that area before. And it was a wake-up call. And as such, we had a fledgling, collaborative, but like a lot of those that some of us have sat in, it was pretty much, I was anticipating that it was just going to be the typical where people were sitting in to defend their turf, and more of a defensive posture than really ready to work together. After the rim fire, I think the result was that there was a recognition that no matter what you benefited or loved from the Tuolumne watershed, unless we figured out how to restore its underlying health, there wasn't a great future for any of those interests. And there was a remarkable convergence between interests that were historically polarized adversaries. We had great leadership from an environmentalist, John Buckley, and a local timber guy, Mike Albrecht, as co-chairs. And that leadership, really helped bring us together. And that continues today with Patrick as chairman, where I think we're really on the cusp of potentially some groundbreaking, some breakthroughs, such that the YSS is one of only 2 groups recognized by the Forest Service nationally to get some special funding to develop this larger landscape planning restoration approach that we've been advocating for years. So, it's not better yet, and there's prospects where it could become better, and that's the positive.
Thank you. It looks like we have one more question in the message section. Oh, we're getting more, which is great. Noah asks, any updates on the Ward's Ferry takeout?
Yeah, thanks, Noah. I don't know when you last were updated on Ward's Ferry. Not much has happened in the past year or two, but the good thing is that, we've been really heavily engaged in this relicensing of Don Pedro. And through that process, kind of in the waning days of the Obama administration, we were successful in getting the irrigation districts to commit to putting in a takeout facility there. It is a very difficult location. The canyon walls, for those of you who have been down there, know it's really steep, and the engineering to build a facility that can get you down to the water's edge, which fluctuates as the reservoir fluctuates, is a challenge. So they have committed to putting in a facility where you can get a vehicle, if I remember, it's been a year or two since I've looked at it, a vehicle down to the water's edge at varying levels, but there's also going to be, I think, a boom platform, because right now, those of you who know, the outfitters bring trucks out there and work off the bridge, and it's not a great situation. So there's going to be this boom platform, but none of this will happen until we move into the next phase of relicensing, and things are have been on hold, in part due to this negotiation happening with the State Water Board. So we're optimistic something will happen there, something will, improved facility will happen, but it's just going to take some time. So not sure if I've answered your question, but that's sort of the current status.
All right, thank you. And Cedric is curious to know if there have been any efforts to work with Native American tribes from the watershed to collaborate on restoration and land management, given their long history on the land and often deep knowledge.
Yeah, great question there. We have worked with the larger tribe up here in Tuolumne County is the Tuolumne Band of Miwok, and they are part of our YSS collaborative, and we have submitted grant proposals together with projects on their land as part of the package, as well as forest restoration projects, and we continue to connect with them. They're very busy. They've got a lot going on, and we're stretched pretty thin. And we don't always fall high on their priority list, but we do connect with them when we can, and look for those opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? You can raise your hand physically if the hand raise option is not working well.
I think I see Susan.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to piggyback on Jim Regain's question about the two exciting new projects in LaGrange and West Modesto. They're going to take years, but I want to encourage you to keep us updated and let us know how we can participate and support them, because just like Dos Rios, it's an ongoing project to persevere through all the various needs for funding, and whatever we can do, please keep us apprised.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Susan. And I see Jim has his hand up. Go ahead, Jim. Take yourself off mute.
Yeah, actually, a follow-up to what Susan just said. You mentioned you had a grant for a start on at least of those two projects. I've been a long-term fan of the work you folks did 10, 15 years ago that put out that basically a strategic plan for a series of parks along the watershed, and it looks like you're one by one starting to bite pieces of the elephant off, which I think is terrific. But can you share with us the amount of the grant that you got? Roughly, you told us that it's roughly $10 million to do both of them. How much you got and what the prognosis is for getting the sufficient funds to finish them off in that time frame?
Right. So it's two separate grants, both from DWR, and as I said, they haven't been formally approved, but I would expect they would. The LaGrange grant is about $3.7 million, and the Tuolumne River Regional Park grant is about $2.1 million. So they get us a big ways down the road, and certainly enough funding to get us really far down the road on the planning, for sure. So, and there's other opportunities out there that we're pursuing. There's Prop 68 was passed by the voters in California a couple of years ago. A lot of those grants are still coming out, and so we'll be pursuing those. And there's even leftover grants from Prop 1, which was earlier than that. So, yeah, I'm optimistic that we're going to get there.
Well, I'm very happy to see that something that you folks did 10, 12 years ago. I think that was a wonderful piece of work, and to see it all starting to come to fruition is really, really impressive to me.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
It looks like we have one more question from Robert. Can you mention the work at Berkeley Camp? How's it going?
Yeah, well, I wish Seth was on the call with us here. We do keep working with Berkeley Tuolumne Camp. In the Friends of Berkeley Tuolumne Camp is one of our YSS members as well. And we have been planning volunteer reforestation days where campers come up and put trees in the ground. We were going to do a big one this spring at a couple different sites, including at the camp itself. Got canceled because of COVID, but there's a lot of enthusiasm from Berkeley Camp, and we have some great relationships with those folks. So very excited about that. And all their work, their camp rebuild is all approved now, and they're going to start some of that work, I think, this summer, and they expect it to take a couple years.
Okay, it looks like we have one last question. I think that's all the time we'll have, and then we have a poll that we would like you to participate in that will show up on the screen. Lynn asks, do the DWR grants provide funding for TRT operations as well?
They provide funding for project management, yeah, so that includes, overhead costs as well. Happy to talk more about that, Lynn, if you'd like. So we do have a quick poll here. Just want to get a sense from folks what your interests are if we do another webinar down the road. And we do want to do a couple, several more over the summertime. So we've put up a poll here. If you can click your preferred choices, and that'll help guide us as we plan the next one. Yeah, definitely appreciate the participation and all the great questions and your response to the poll. Looks like probably captured most folks that are going to respond. I think we can call it a wrap. Thank you all for all your participation, and great seeing everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yes.
Thank you.
Patrick.
To everyone.
Thanks.
Everyone.
Patrick, good to see you.
Well, thank you.
You bet. Good seeing you.